So, you'll have the software you need. Boot disks are helpful. If you suppose you want to image a hard drive. You want all the data off the hard drive. Now, the standard way you do it is you take apart the machine, you disconnect the hard drive, you plug it through a write blocker to a desktop machine, which then images it, or you put it in a hard drive duplicator, where you just plug in another drive, plug in another, and press the button, and off it goes. But another option, which some people do, especially smaller people that have less money and have less machines to image, is you get a forensic boot disk. Like the one we're going to use in this class is Deft. There's a bunch of them. Every modern operating system changes the data on the hard drive every time it boots up. Before you even can see the hard drive in my computer or in the media folder, it touches the drive, makes entries in the log, changes the date of the last time this drive was accessed and other things. So some of the data changes. Now, it's nothing too significant, but there has been a tradition of perfection in forensics where you want to image the drive without changing it at all. And so one way to do that is with a forensic boot disk. The forensic boot disks are typically Linux, although there are Windows ones also, and the operating system has been modified so it will not write on the drive at all during boot up. And then there's a software write blocker is what it is.
Deft one of these tools?
Deft is one of them, yeah. Deft is, there's also a Kali forensic mode, there used to be a backtrack forensic mode. There's a bunch of boot disks that are modified OSs that won't change it. And this way, if you're too cheap to buy a write blocker, you can still make an image of a drive and you don't even have to take the machine apart. You boot from the disk, you plug in a USB drive, you copy the data onto here, and then you didn't change anything. So that's an option. And so there's various ones, Kali, Kane, and Helix are ones that can do this. You're going to need a lot of operating systems because when you do get information from a hard drive, you might find, say, documents written in some proprietary format for some goofy word processor like WordPerfect or something that you don't have, and then you're going to have to install WordPerfect someplace to see it. And so virtual operating, and also to interpret the data you find, you're going to have to do research, tests on the machine. Like, I find this strange registry key or log entry and I don't really know how I got there. I'm going to have to boot up the similar machine here and do things and see exactly what action creates that entry. Anyway, then you have disk imaging tools. There's a bunch of them, and there's National Institute of Standards has a project to check them for quality so you can get tools that have passed certain tests. Memory capture is live forensics. You run a process on the evidence machine, which changes it, and then you get an image of the memory, so you get what's called a smear because it's changing. And if you do it again, you'll get a different answer because processes have changed. So it's not at all as scientific and perfect, but it does contain important evidence, especially for incident response, where probably the most important evidence is in RAM, the running processes. There might very well be nothing on the hard drive that's interesting. Anyway, and then there's live response, things that mess with running machines. For example, if you get enterprise version of Encase or FTK for like $100,000, it will actually let you make complete disk images of computers over the network while they're on and in use. And this is what you might do if somebody in your company is selling your secrets and you don't know who, and you don't want to tip them off or create problems in your company by accusing people, so you covertly image their machines over the network while they're at work and they don't even know what's happening. Then you analyze them, and then you only bust the guilty party, and the other people never know they were under suspicion. So this takes time, but it can be done. Anyway, and so the forensic examination suites will do this for you. Encase and FTK are the two big commercial offering. Access Data makes FTK. Almost every big company uses one or the other of these. They're both huge, gigantic, sprawling products like Microsoft Office. They have constant updates for every new device and cell phone and website and chat room, and everything is all built into it. And they cost a lot of money. If you don't have all that money, you use the open source product, SleuthKit and Autopsy, which is the free open source product that lets you do similar investigations. It is much, much less convenient, more out of date, and you have to add many other open source tools to it to get anything approaching the same functionality of those big expensive suites. And there's log analysis tools also like Splunk and such, which help you a lot. I say logs, for incident response, logs are probably a lot more useful for you than whole disk images. Whole disk images are typically used to get evidence to lock people up in court, but to find out what's going on fast, you use something with much less information so you're not drowning under all this irrelevant data, like a log would be a lot handier. If you have logs of what's going on with all the network connections, then when you find an IP address of interest, you can quickly find all the traffic going to that IP address and get a clue what it's doing. All right, yeah.
But couldn't there be a problem with someone altering the logs, per se?
Yes, that is a big issue. A lot of people do erase logs, so it is recommended that you send the logs to a central server and you put them on write once media, like the CD or something. Or another simple solution is to have a server that has no IP address where the log information goes, so it cannot be remotely controlled or detected. But yes, that is an issue. You do need to be aware that logs could be altered. All right, so there's evidence handling, and this is what they call positive control. This means there is a human that can go to the witness stand and take the oath and say, I made sure that nobody messed with the evidence. I took it and I kept my eyes on it until I locked it in the safe and I have the only key and nobody can get in my safe. And that's what you have to do. If you have that creates a chain of custody, so there are people who can swear that from this time to this time I had the evidence, then I handed it to that person, and then they handed the evidence, and at all times it was controlled, so nobody was messing with it. If you have a broken chain of custody, the evidence will be of very little value in court, because there will be an argument that perhaps when you weren't looking, somebody messed with the evidence, and therefore it's no longer containing the right data. So that's an issue. If you're going to ship it, you have to ship it with some company that lets you track it. You have to pack it in tamper-evident packaging so you can say nobody opened it. And if you imagine you can trust that, just go to DEF CON. For the last 4 years, Dark Tangent, the founder of DEF CON, has made the tamper-evident contest, where they wrap things up in tamper-evident package and you people carefully open it and close it again in a way that you can't tell it happened. They can peel off the child-proof tops and the glue and the tape, and nothing is ever perfect. Anyway, if you have digital evidence, you typically calculate a hash value of it, like an MD5 or a SHA-1 hash, and then if somebody makes a copy of it or alters it, you can verify that copies are 100% accurate, and if anything changes, the hash will help you detect that it changed. Technically, MD5 is not the best hash to use, but it's common in forensic work. MD5 is hard to spoof. It is possible to alter something and then put another malicious alteration to keep the MD5 the same, but it's not easy. And in practice, most people are content with MD5 for forensic work. You'll have these forms, something that marks evidence with serial numbers and stuff, so you know exactly which one it is, and then a chain of custody form saying who had it from this time to this time, and then who had it here, and you can call all these people, if necessary, to testify in court to guarantee that you have some degree of confidence that nobody messed with that evidence from the time you seized it to the time it appeared in court. That's why you only work with copies. The original drive or computer or whatever it is, CD or iPod or whatever, is in a safe, so you can go to court and say, this is the thing that they did the bad thing on, right here. You have to have that's best evidence. If you have the exact thing, like the murder weapon in court, just a copy or a picture of it is not at all the same. And there are rules here from the government. For United States attorneys, there's a long document here full of the details of obtaining evidence. It's relatively common sense stuff. You have to package the evidence so that static electricity can't get at it and lock it up and maintain the chain of custody. And if you make images, you have to use write blockers so you're not altering them, and on it goes. In practice, none of this is graven in stone. Just like saying there's an approved forensic tool, there is no approved forensic way to gather evidence. For example, sometimes people just do what they have to do, like a cop will just go to a crime scene and find a cell phone, and they'll page through the text messages and just take photographs of the text messages with a camera. Now, that is not an approved technique that you will find here, not at all. It doesn't get all the evidence. It doesn't not modify it, but it's still true that the messages were on that phone. The real evidence is the human testifying, not the technical stuff. So that counts. And so, often you do have to modify the perfect procedures for the reality of your problem. Like, for example, exigent circumstances. If there's something like kidnapping and you're in a hurry, you don't have time to wait a week for the perfect procedure. You just do whatever you have to. You can also just kick down doors and seize things without a search warrant in a case like that, because it's an emergency. It's called exigent circumstances. So, but if you do something in the non-standard, non-approved way, you better keep a record and be able to explain why you did it that way. If you just did it that way because you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to look good on the witness stand. Anyway, you also have an internal knowledge repository. You have things happening, and you should have some kind of ticket system, like a help desk system. There are many things happening in your investigation, and you want to make sure you didn't forget something. Because while I was researching that, I found four other things. Make a note someplace, so we do go back and examine these other things and decide if you really have to do an investigation in that direction also. And then you have knowledge that's useful, like you're going to be developing your favorite tools, your favorite techniques. You're going to have your own internal procedures, so that all your examiners have like a checklist they go down, and you can say, yes, for example, one guy I know, he said always uses a drive to put evidence on that has been scanned for viruses and forensically wiped before you put evidence on it, and he just makes sure everybody in his company always does that, and now you can always say that happened. You have these standard procedures, and I enforce that everybody does the standard thing, and then I never have to worry about when people say, well, maybe that data was already on the drive before you put the evidence on it. You know, we have a procedure to make sure that never happens. Anyway, a few more eye clickers. All right. So, which one of these is network monitoring software? Wow.
Yeah, it looks like a typhoon or something.
A lot of noise out there.
Yeah, a lot of wind.
Yeah. First a lot of fire, and now a lot of wind or rain or something.
That's not a good combination.
No.
Well.
No, it's not. Good luck.
Well, the rain might put out the fire, I guess. All right, so that's, of course, Security Onion. Whoa, that's not it. Oh, phooey. I got to go to this one, and then this one. There, good, Security Onion, which I've heard about for years, never knew what it was, so I read this chapter. So that's what it is. It's an IDS system, essentially. All right. Which one protects data on a stolen laptop, which is a huge issue. At San Francisco Airport, they have 50,000 stolen laptops left there per year,
Wow.
and they just pile them up on pallets and sell them at auction. No attempt is made to clean them or anything. I'll quit at 30. All right, and the thing that will save you there is full disk encryption, FDE. There used to be a system in earlier versions of, say, Microsoft products where you would encrypt just one folder, and that turned out to be no good because running computers make extra copies of data all over the place, like the page file and temporary files, so that even if you have encrypted the folder, your documents folder, then there will be copies of fragments of that document elsewhere, so the only thing that is actually considered good enough is full disk encryption. And if you encrypt the whole hard drive with a modern product, and then someone steals the laptop, you do not have to go through breach disclosure. You can go to court and say there is no breach because the drive is stolen, but the data was protected and nobody got the data. And if you only encrypted one folder, you can't really say that because it is possible that some of that data was outside that folder. Anyway, all right. So which one of these will prevent an email from being discoverable? Good, I see the answers coming in. I'll quit at 20. All right, and that's that privileged, confidential label, attorney work product. That means that it is considered.
So S-MIME emails are still discovered?
Yeah, it's A, pardon me, not S-MIME, A. That's interesting. I'm surprised the most popular answer. Yeah, S-MIME. This is where we have an issue. Discoverable is a technical legal term.
Yes.
Discovery means you have to produce it in response to a discovery order from a judge. Now, S-MIME encrypts email so criminals can't steal it off the wire in transit. It protects it while it's in transit, but it does not protect you from the court system, where they will say, you must give us all the emails about this, and you have to cough them up. But if they were privileged attorney product, then they're protected by in the eyes of the law. So that's an issue. All right. So which one will give you information about running processes? Quit at 30.
Yeah, exactly.
You may remember the first day I said there are 4 jobs you can get from this class, and one of them is e-discovery. The people who are able to hunt through computer systems and produce the required evidence to go to court. That's one big use of computer forensics. Anyway, this is a RAM image. The RAM is where information about running processes is stored in active network connections. You can't get it from boot disk because you turn off the OS and boot from the disk, and so you lose all that. But this is where you'll find it. You might possibly be able to get some of it in log. If you configure the logs to log like process initiation and termination, then it'll be here, but very few logs have it by default. Yeah.
Why is it D an answer?
B?
D.
D. Your forensic examination suite is used to analyze an image that's been captured, not to gather data.
Doesn't do RAM captures?
They have incidental tools that can do it,
Okay.
but the examination suite is to analyze it later. Yeah, but you're right. So for FTK Imager can do it, and you can argue whether that's part of the suite or not. That's their free product,
Yeah.
which goes along with the tool. Yeah, it might have some truth in it, but the particular tool is the RAM capture tool, and this suite may contain a RAM capture
That's
tool.
the name of the tool, RAM capture tool?
No, that's not
the
specific.
category.
That's the category. Yeah, yeah. The actual.
What's the example of that?
FTK Imager is one of the famous ones. It goes with the FTK product, and they make the capturing tool free so everybody can use it. And once you get it, you can put it in any tool. You can put it in Sleuthkit or Autopsy or Encase or FTK. All right. So, so the infrastructure, there's the general issues. You've got your computing devices should be set up in ways that will help make it easy to get the evidence you need. One of the big issues, of course, is you have to know what your assets are. I mentioned before, I'm not sure this class, but others, if you go to a company and they have some all-important data, like credit card numbers, and you ask them, how many copies are there of that and where are they? Typically, they have no clue. Well, it's on the server, it's in Amazon, it's in Microsoft Cloud, it's in people's Dropboxes, it's on their employees' cell phones and their email and their thumb drive, and we don't even know where it is, and you can't have that attitude. You got to actually be able to find where your assets are in order to protect them. And then the network issues is another big one here. When the certificate authorities got hacked by the Komodo hacker about 4 years ago, he revealed that many trusted certificate authorities had no network segmentation at all. Their network was just a flat network all connected to the same switch. So once you take over the web server, you just sail right in and steal all the certificates too. And that is emphatically not what you're supposed to do. This college has 100 VLANs. And you should be separating your network into segments and isolating them from each other so that if somebody breaks into a part, they only have the low privilege part and there are more barriers protecting the good stuff. So your computing devices. One mistake a lot of companies make is they only care about securing their important devices, like their database server, their web server, and they really don't think it matters to secure their webcam and their printer, and the bad guys know this, so they come in through the passive least resistance, they infect some guy's laptop and then the printer and move in from that. So it's a problem. So like I say, in general, what they recommend is figure out what you have and then find some way to improve it. Try to, and so you can have log settings to record more things that are important and have your antivirus and intrusion protection systems configured to protect more devices. If you want to harden hosts, there are standards for this. These are the security technical information guides from the NSA and other companies that say, in terms of what you're trying to do here, Windows 2008 DNS server, a mail server, a domain controller, there are long lists of recommended settings to secure these devices, and this is what a lot of companies, especially military organizations, do. They meet the standard. And like I say, a lot of this business, as security moves from being an art to being a science, it can't really become a science, but it can become something organized like the law, and there are going to be more and more compliance officers, where rather than fighting fires and dealing with combating criminals directly, you just have standards like this, and your job is to make sure that all our devices are up to the standard. So asset management is a huge issue. Most companies can't even tell you how many copies of software they have, and as it talks in the book about how during intrusion response, they often discover whole servers that management didn't know were there. Especially these days, there's an issue of VM sprawl. At most large companies, for example, City College, you can't really get a server in any reasonable amount of time. There's some department you apply for and on it goes. So people just buy Amazon Web Servers and just put company data on it. And like your sales department will just put up a server for their latest promotion. And nobody in the IT department even knows this has happened. So it's not got the software to monitor it. It's not got the firewalls and antivirus and everything. And the people running it. And so this happens a lot. So just knowing what you've got is really important. You want to know what devices you have out there. You want to know when they were turned on, because if you figure out your timeline is from 10 months ago to now, then a device that was put up 5 months ago is not going to have the evidence. You need to go find the previous device that has what happened more than 5 months ago, and so on. A proper asset list saying what have you got and just a few basic facts about it will greatly help you in figuring out where you should be looking to find your evidence. And you can perform a survey. This is typically done with survey monitoring tools that put an agent on every machine and they answer back. And so it will find the operating system and all the hardware and network devices and draw the diagram and connect them all. And you'd like to know all the installed software too, and what version it is and all that. You really need to do this anyway, just so you can be properly patching that stuff, which essentially nobody does. This is what they call H.D. Moore's Law is kind of a joke. He wrote Metasploit. Metasploit is a tool that has about 1,000 attacks in it. Any attack that has been published and the patch is already out there, he puts it in Metasploit. And the rule is every corporation you can get in with Metasploit, because somewhere there is some clown that did not update something. They have an old version of AOL Instant Messenger or a game or a router firmware. Somewhere somebody forgot to update something, and just running all the known exploits is enough to get in. Passwords are ridiculous, as we know. Everybody's getting hacked right and left through passwords. The U.S. government and the military said they're just going to quit using passwords entirely. One of the more amusing things Obama said was one day he declared about 4 years ago that he was going to make a U.S. government password system, so everyone would have the U.S. government password, and that's the only one you have to remember. We'll handle all your passwords. And like so many things Obama said, the next day he just tried to pretend he never said it. Guys, everyone said, "Are you out of your mind?" This is what gets the military people very mad, because he claims I'm going to invade Syria on Assad's side because of chemical weapons, and tomorrow, oh, that's not popular. We'll just forget about that. Anyway, so, but that's the game. Since passwords are so easy to steal, and the hashing routines used by operating systems, primarily Windows, is so terrible that they might as well store them in plain text, your attacker probably has not one password, but hundreds of them. They get find them on a domain controller. And what's even worse is you probably have passwords on the system that most people don't even know about that are never changed. Some people put the same local administrator account on every system, which makes it a whole lot easier to run something like a management tool that will collect logs off all of them, but it makes it easier for the attacker too. And these service accounts have been involved in many breaches. There are services that run on Windows. And these are processes that offer some kind of service to other software, and these launch often before you log in. So they can't run with your account. There are special accounts called things like network service and local system, which are used to launch these services. And in a corporate environment, these service accounts are shared. For example, your email server has to go fetch email from another machine, and it logs in there with some special account. So these accounts are typically hard-coded into software, and you can't change the password. And so there's for another time I taught this course in another book, they had an explanation. Someone got in the network and took over the service accounts and stole everything. They logged in as these services and then stole all the data. And this went on for many months before anybody caught them, because now they don't even find any suspicious entries in the log and the log off lists. But it's a problem. This is one of the common weak spots of networks, the service accounts. There's devices you might want. You usually have some kind of device keeping track of your software and what version is running and such. A central system keeping track of all these things would be nice. A central place like Splunk where all these events are recorded in one place that's searchable. You can buy, there's free products like Splunk, ELSA, and Snare, and there's commercial products like this where you buy some gadget, you stick it in a rack, out comes their virtual appliance, and it will now keep track of all these events coming in and provide them in some interface so you can search and answer questions like, how many other machines are showing signs of being infected with the same malware, and so on. Big corporations really need these things. You have to retain data. If you have log data, the whole point of it is it's not that huge, so it is reasonable to retain it for a long period of time, like a year. Now, your legal team, if they are paying attention to disasters like Arthur Anderson, will probably tell you to delete everything after 90 days, because if you're getting sued all the time and you have a regular pattern of deleting stuff, then you don't have as much evidence you have to hand the other side. But from a viewpoint of the incident response people, they would like you to keep it for longer, so that when they find an infection, it's often been there for a whole year, and you want to trace it back to where it started. So anyway, there's always two sides to everything. On Windows, you want to log on and log off events. Most of them will do this by default even. Privileged things like creating new users, moving users to other groups, like elevating them to administrator. And it'd be nice if you can log process creation and termination. That's going to make a lot of log entries, but then you see exactly who did what all the time, which is pretty nice. And so they say make the local logs bigger and forward them all to a central logging system. Rudimentary capacity to do this is now included by default in all Windows systems, but most corporations find it to be valuable to pay for one of those real logging systems that does it much better. But even just modern Windows 7 or Windows 10 machines have the ability to forward their logs to a central location. Yeah?
So if people hack into your computer, they have access to delete the log. So
they do. And that's why the default Microsoft logging system cannot do anything about that. That's why if you pay for a commercial logging system, there are ones that will actually make files that are cryptographically signed. and stored, and now they can't be altered. Otherwise, all these logs, for example, are no good in court because they could all be modified. I mean, at least you'd have to address this issue. You might be able to get some good out of them in court, but technically you can't trust them. You can there's a bunch of hacking tools to clear the logs and alter the logs. Yeah. All right. And on Linux, it's similar. Linux or Unix, you can account for each process starting and stopping, and again, you can forward it all to a centralized logging system. Linux typically has a lot more logs by default, but it's much more scattered. Everything you install will have its own log, like the Apache log, the FTP log, the DNS log, and this is part of the lore of being a Linux administrator. Is you'll learn where all these logs are. In Windows, they're all in one central place. Event log, Linux doesn't work that way, which is why software is much more simply connected to the operating system. Easier to remove, easier to modify, but there are no real standards. And that's why things like Splunk become very valuable, because you can have a giant pile of data that is not all formatted the same and still search through it the way Google searches through the internet. Your applications, your web server, your proxy, your custom accounting software, your database software, your email software, all these things have logs, and you want all that to get to the central location. For example, your DHCP server is handing out addresses. If you don't log that stuff, then when you find IP addresses, you don't know which machine they're on. That's no good. That's why your book emphatically says you should really keep the DHCP log for a year. Otherwise, you find IP addresses, and there's no way to find the corresponding MAC addresses, which can really slow down the value of your response. Another thing people often fail to do is to log DNS queries. This is so easy, so small, and it tells you exactly what URL everybody's been using. So it tells you if your employees are doing bad things. It tells you if you're infected with malware. It's very easy to search through. This is like a really high-value thing to record that is small and easy to get, and so shouldn't be neglected. All right, your antivirus and your intrusion prevention systems will log events. Unfortunately, most antivirus will automatically delete all the malware, and that would be fine if it was really working and saving you, but often it's not. Often it's not really catching all the stuff, so it'd be a lot better if it quarantines that malware to a central location so you have a sample you can analyze if it turns out that that's part of an attack and your antivirus hasn't really been preventing it. That's a lot better. Another thing you also don't want it doing is taking a copy of that file and sending it back to the vendor to put in their definitions, because that can let the bad guy know you're onto them, and it may even have collected sensitive data. So that sample going back actually has data in it. So you don't usually want to accept the default configuration of your antivirus. We certainly could have used this here. Back when we had a crooked chief technology officer who hired a crooked contractor to create a worldwide scandal of the viruses we supposedly had here, the issue came up, how many viruses do you have on campus? And it turned out there was one lab with 20 machines that actually had some viruses because there wasn't enough RAM, so the local administrator took off the antivirus to make machines run faster. And in retrospect, it would have been better if we had an enterprise class AV that was reporting to a central server, and then we could say, how is the antivirus running and up to date on all the machines? And then we would get a warning, wait, these machines don't have antivirus anymore. That's the sort of thing you ought to find out before people are getting infected and complaining. So you can have investigative tools, access data, and guidance software have enterprise versions that will help you write queries that then push out to all the machines. You can also use Mandia's tool, or you can just make your own system with some shell scripts in a Linux system and Windows management instrumentation queries. You can ask a computer with the right credentials, what do you have this registry key? Do you have this file? What's the version of this product? And you can write a script that will touch every Windows machine and find out that information. And that's all these fancy tools are doing. They're just making it beautiful and pretty and easy to use. And if you're a good script monkey, you can do it yourself. A lot of Windows Server administration is learning to use languages like PowerShell and to write scripts that will manage all your machines as you push out updates and so on. So a lot of other things out there. You should be patching your stuff, which is extremely difficult because you have to patch not only the operating systems but all the applications. And if you don't limit your people to only using a certain menu of applications, you're not even going to know what they're using and know how to push out the patches. So that's quite a challenge. Two-factor authentication is extremely helpful, so that then the bad guys steal the passwords, they still can't get in because they don't have the other factor. So you have firewall and AV solutions, quit using out of things that are end of life, like Windows XP, and so on. Configuration management systems are also good. And as we said, there are some standards. You can go to recommended security standards, and then you could just make sure you're complying with them. Here's an example of a good network. The idea, instead of having just all these machines connect to one switch, they're segmented. So the outside world goes through a border router and firewalls, and then it gets to the DMZ, which has your web server and email server. And then there's separate proxy servers. All the internal machines cannot connect directly to the internet. All their traffic has to go to the proxy, where it is decrypted and examined on the way in and way out, and logs are kept. Then you have separate zones for each part of the company, sales, engineering, finance, and so on, and they have their own servers. And when they try to go outside that to other parts of the company, there are access control lists that say they can only send certain kinds of traffic out. We go, there's another picture. Yeah, this one shows the details of the finance department. So you have employees coming. So when they connect to their own servers, they use encrypted channels locally, HTTPS on 443, and that's the only kind of traffic permitted. Just doesn't talk to the server. Then this server can only talk with JSON to the application server, and it can only talk with SQL, the database server, and you don't allow any traffic on other ports or other protocols at any of these steps. So the only thing servers can do is send the right kind of traffic to do real business. And if somebody tries to install malware on this that tries to phone home, it can't get there because it's only allowed to send traffic where it should be going. And that's the right way to do it. That's why access control lists and network segmentation make you a lot safer, because there are only certain roads to follow and you can't make a shortcut to get out. Yeah?
So the best way to attack would be to get a access of the finance computer?
Well, the way you get in is you pivot. So you come in, you compromise something like the email server or the web server, then you install malware on it and remote control it. Then from that, you hop somewhere else. In this case, you're not going to get very well at all. So what you do is you send out an email with spam in it. You get some clown down here to click on it in finance, and you take over that desktop without administrative privileges. Now you scan and maybe find a way to elevate privileges and try to find your credentials to get on this one. But you have to find some vulnerable spot and then hop around. And if you, in the first case history that I thought was Target, this was a big issue. They got into the place where the credit card numbers were, but none of those machines could connect to the internet at all. And so they had to compromise a bunch of other machines to make a multi-layer proxying hop to get the data out. And that's what you want. You want it to be hard to steal the data. All right. So that's the game. You can filter traffic, and whatever you let people do, you let only that happen. And you have two-factor authentication for anything that crosses your security boundaries, so that even if the bad guy steals passwords, they still can't get into one of these areas or out of one of these areas easily. Microsoft remote procedure calls have been a huge problem for years. Many of the famous malware outbreaks work on this. This is these ports, 135, 137, 8, 9, and 445. This is Microsoft file and printer sharing and many other services. And people often let these ports through, and if you do, you might as well not have a firewall at all. These are probably the most dangerous things coming in. And it has led to a lot of problems. One simple example in the book is if you allow file shares, then people can just upload the file called PSExec and then run any process on the server. So you're giving them remote administration of the server when you think you're just sharing files. All right, so like I say, access control is these are just router type access control lists that only let certain ports and protocols go out certain wires, and that's the point. So people in the finance department can get email, and they can get on the web only by going through a proxy, and you don't let any servers make outgoing connections to the internet. And that way, even if they get infected, they can't phone home for commands, so it's good. And that, you remember, in I think the Target example, there were these jump boxes. There has to be some way out, and the only way to get in is the official jump box, so now the attacker will have to compromise the jump box to allow another channel of data going out. Workstations are limited, so they can only go where they're supposed to go, and only on the official ports, and that helps prevent infections from spreading. There's also port isolation, which is what they have at Starbucks. If you go to Starbucks and connect to their Wi-Fi and then run Nmap, your entire network has only two machines, you and them. Every single customer is on a separate VLAN. This is a very good idea, which we don't have here, unfortunately. This way you cannot attack other customers. You can't bounce off theirs and attack them. You're on the same layer 2 as other customers, which is a very good thing. Of course, it's not encrypted, so you can just send traffic directly to the other machine, so it doesn't do you that much good, but it is still a pretty good idea to separate your client machines from each other so that they cannot easily, infections can't easily spread horizontally among the network clients. Then there are addresses that you are not using. So, for example, if you're only allowed to go through the proxy and authenticate to get to the internet, then any traffic that tries to directly go to internet addresses is forbidden, so you can black hole it. Black holing means you put it in the routing tables to just throw those away at the routers so the packets go nowhere. That's one way to deal with it. A more useful thing to do is to collect that traffic at a monitoring station and see who is trying to send traffic that violates my network policy, because that's a problem. And now I can get packets with the MAC address and IP address of the computer that's attempting to phone home, and I can find out that computer has apparently got a security problem and is worth investigating. This is a simple early warning system. Somebody is sending traffic that's violating our policy. And honeypots are the things a lot of people talk about, where you put up machines deliberately intending to be hacked. Mandia people don't have much respect for this. I always sound kind of insane to me, and they say all the time you spend making a honeypot would be better spent actually defending your stupid systems. Don't even talk to me about honeypots until you actually have logs everywhere and good firewall rules and you're updating all your software and all that jazz. If you've really done all that, then maybe you want to waste your time setting up a honeypot. But if you haven't done all that, then your real network is the honeypot, and we might as well examine your real network to see who's taking it over, and that's the reality. Anyway, you have documentation of your network, which is very helpful at various levels, so you can see what the business processes are and what the borders are from one zone to another. You should have change control that keeps track of how things are being updated and what changes are being made. Otherwise, you don't have accurate network diagrams, and therefore you can't really control who's going through, and you log everything you can. You can have full content capture, where you capture all the packets and store them. This won't be much use unless you also have the decryption keys for encrypted traffic. You can have NetFlow. NetFlow is what ISPs use. NetFlow keeps track of how much bandwidth you'll be using for each process, so they can charge you for it. And that's the kind of information you get aggregate, how many total packets per second have been going on different protocols. But that's good stuff to know. And of course, firewalls, IDS, and proxy servers have obvious security logs that help you. And DNS and DHCP are very useful services to log, so you know what IP addresses have been on there, how many people have been connecting, and all the domain names they've been going to. Those are very small, easy things to do. And you can configure a DNS black hole to prevent people from going to forbidden domains, or to redirect their traffic to a monitoring server. So anybody that types in a domain name that is not on the approved list, they go over here as apparently infected or an employee doing bad things. All right, I got the last batch of iClickers. That'll do. So, a password that's difficult to change. I'll quit at 30. All right, those are the service accounts that are unfortunately often hard-coded, and therefore it's difficult to change the password everywhere you need to change it and have things work. So in practice, people avoid changing it to avoid breaking things. Which one of these will destroy evidence?
I think I would go this one.
What's that?
Oh, that was on all the time for a while.
I'll quit at 30. All right, and that's your AV, your antivirus. We'll go let's delete files, which is kind of hard if something's going wrong and you want to look at those files later. All right, which one is essential if you want to find out what IP addresses go to what machines? All right, I guess I can quit at 25. Looks like the answers are pretty much in. All right, that's your DHCP. That's what hands out the addresses, and you have to log it, or you really will not know what machine is doing what. At this college, they like to use static addresses on the end user workstations, which is a much inferior, much more annoying, old-fashioned way to handle this problem. Anyway, All right, which one is a dangerous Microsoft feature? Linux version of it is not that safe either, actually. I'll quit at 30. All right, and that's remote procedure calls. You really should be not letting them go through your firewall, and you really shouldn't be letting them go from one segment of your network to another. It's just not a secure enough protocol. If you want to share data from one segment to another, you should do it through something like an SSH tunnel. Yeah.
So Linux is Samba, right?
Samba is the file sharing. Samba. There's actually a Linux remote procedure call too on port 110, and it also has similar security problems because many services are provided on one port, and frequently one of them has a flaw.
Okay, I thought it was Samba because it's.
Yes, Samba. Samba is what lets Linux machines interact with Windows machines over this SM file sharing protocol.
Okay.
Good. All right. And so, which one reduces the risk from stolen passwords? Which is a really good idea because passwords get stolen all the time. Every day there's another couple of companies that have been hacked and lost all their passwords.
It's all the news about Dropbox.
Yeah, but that's actually from 2012, that breach. It's just hitting the news now for some reason.
Wow. 68 is
That's why I was sort of baffled. Things hit the news cycle. They're sort of senseless in the world of security, just like everything else. Anyway, that's two-factor authentication. Since passwords just can't be trusted, you really should require more than a password to get a high privileged asset. All right, I'll just see who's got the most right, and I'll go to the lab. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to add the two together. That's why I give you the 1
I
point.
got +2. Oh, you just gave me 1? Okay. Yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens here. Well, if you figure out that you won, then we'll see. We'll see. Let's find out here. All right, here's the winners: 11 and 10, 71 and 77.
Oh, sorry. I missed, my answers weren't recorded for the first two, and I got 1 right on the first 2.
Well, let me stop this recording and let's see what we figured out.
So the first 2 questions I answered with my old one.
Yeah, that's
which is 31. Or I think it was 30.